Hello everyone, I'm Rodney Reynolds and welcome to another video. So this one is about maybe, just maybe, solving this stitching, shuttering, pausing, glitching problem that you're having in some games, even though you have a pretty decent system overall. What is going on? Is it the operating system, the drivers, the hardware that you have? Is it a combination of all of it? Who knows? You've tried everything. Maybe you've even installed Windows again, and you're still getting this problem. What could it be? Well, it might be HAGS. You might have a HAG problem. And HAGS stands for Hardware Accelerated GPU Scheduling. Alright, so let's slow down here a little bit, and before I move on and tell you more what HAGS is, and maybe that might be a problem, maybe not, I'm going to be outlining 10 other things that might be causing this issue for you. So make sure you stick around to the end, because from the beginning to the end of this video, there's lots of important information that you probably should consume. I'm going to also summarize all of this in contents, and you can click on those different chapters in the YouTube description down below. So the first thing that you really want to make sure of is the fact that you have your operating system as well as all drivers updated. Now I would, before updating your video card driver, do some research on the current one that you have, and it might be affecting the game that you are playing. It might work on one game, not work on another game. Some of the newer games need newer drivers, but do a double check. Reddit is a good place to go if you want to check out what other people are saying about that particular driver, the one maybe that you have, or the one that you're possibly thinking about upgrading to. So here's another very important thing to consider. What will you be playing in a year or 2 or 3 from now? Because those games are going to require a lot more power. So you need to today get a system that is not going to bottleneck. You don't want to get a system, for example, where everything is great except there isn't enough system memory, because that would be your bottleneck, and that could cause all kinds of problems when you are gaming. So look forward and get a system. It might cost you a little more, you might have to save up for it, but get something that's going to truly last you for maybe 2 to 3 years. Overheating, that could also be a problem. So keep your video card, your CPU, your memory, your drive temperatures in check. Make sure they're not reaching really high temperatures. Also, clean your system out. Free it of all the dust that's in there. Be warned though, if you are using an air compressor or canned air, be very careful when you're doing that. You can damage components if you are using compressed air of any sort. As well, if you're finding that your games and your applications or your system is crashing randomly, restarting randomly, that possibly could be a memory issue. You might want to try replacing your memory. Also, if you are overclocking, reduce the overclock or cancel the overclock completely and see if it is still happening. If it's not, then it might be a component is being pushed too far, and you will have to reevaluate your overclocking and try something a little different, or not use it at all. Now, I mentioned this previously, but I want to reiterate it. System memory is very important. How much should you have? I would recommend a minimum these days of 32 gigabytes. That way you can run the game and maybe some other things in the background. Although running things in the background could also cause crashing and freezing and game issues as well, so just keep that in mind. And this also goes for storage. Make sure your C drive is large enough. I would recommend at minimum getting a 1 terabyte SSD of sorts. However, I would personally recommend a 2 terabyte drive, because this is what's going to happen. If you get a half a terabyte drive, a 500 gigabyte drive, for example, you're going to replace that, trust me, in a couple of months, if not sooner. Then you maybe get a 1 terabyte drive. Then you run out of space on that. And then you end up getting a 2 terabyte drive. Just do yourself a favor. Go out and either purchase a system with a 2 terabyte drive, or go ahead and upgrade it right away as soon as possible, because maybe you can get a better deal if you buy it after the fact, especially if you are getting a pre-built system. Also, make sure if you have a smaller drive that you're not running out of space. As well, make sure you download the software that comes with your drive, because this software will definitely maintain the health of your drive. Also, it might give you a massive performance boost, plus, of course, updating the firmware and that software very easily. Network lag is also another issue, so check your network drivers, whether they are wired or wireless. A wired connection, by the way, is generally better, not necessarily always. It depends, of course, on your particular network setup. Check your router, your cables, all that stuff. If you are still having problems, you might want to contact your provider. But with online gaming, of course, a really fast internet connection is super important. If you are not doing a lot of online gaming, then the whole network side of things might not be your problem. Antivirus software could also interfere with game performance in the fact that it might be blocking a file or a bunch of files for that particular game. Of course, you can go into your antivirus software and you can set up different rules if you want to do that. But it might be easier to temporarily disable your antivirus software, and note I said temporarily, and see if the problem goes away. If it does, it's something to do with your antivirus software. Also, make sure that you're updating your operating system as often as possible with the latest releases and patches, because generally speaking, they could have a bunch of improvements and fixes. Now, of course, there's also the possibility that these updates and patches could break things. Now, what I'm about to tell you next could solve the problem for you completely. GPU settings are very important, so do a default setup first. Don't experiment too much. Try the games that you have first and see if they're working okay. If they are, leave it. Let it be, because sometimes when you tweak things, it can break games. Maybe one game might be a little bit better, but is it worth that 1 or 2 frames per second that you're getting in one game and not another, and then doing that breaks a game that you like playing? So really, a default setup is probably best for most people, unless you're really technical and you know what you're doing. And this is a very important point about VSync and G-Sync. So vertical syncing is where the game syncs with your monitor. So if your monitor is 60 Hertz, then the game is 60 frames per second. If the monitor is 144, and if your video card can keep up with that, it's 144 frames per second, or 75 Hertz, 75 frames per second. I think you get the idea. Sometimes enabling VSync, turning it on, will fix the problem. However, sometimes turning it off will also solve the problem, and this is game to game. VSync and G-Sync, enable them, disable them, see what works best for you. I mean, all of this is about experimenting, and you might have to take some time. It could be frustrating, but it's time well spent. And once you find out what causes the problem, and usually you will be able to figure it out. Sometimes, though, it is the game, and the game developers also need to patch the game, and it could be a systemic problem, right, from that side of things. And if that is the issue, well, there's nothing much that you can really do to mitigate it. So now let's get back to what I started to talk about at the beginning of the video, and that's HAGS. So what is HAGS, or Hardware Accelerated GPU Scheduling, anyway? Well, it's supposed to make your whole system run smoother, and as we know, that might not necessarily be the case. I'll go over some scenarios here with you in just a moment. However, what it does really is it takes these GPU schedule tasks that the CPU may be doing, and it kind of pushes them to a dedicated GPU, which is your video card. So it takes the load off the CPU and pushes it to the GPU. And here are some use cases. If you have a well-balanced system overall, or even a high-end system, turn it off. If you have a decent CPU and a middle-of-the-road video card, turn it off. However, maybe you've upgraded your video card, but you didn't upgrade your CPU. So your CPU is a little older, a little slower, and your GPU, you know, it's middle of the road. In that case, turn it on. These are just general rules though. Experiment with it and see how it works for you. Well, I hope this video has been helpful to you and it has resolved your gaming issue, because I know how frustrating it can be. If it hasn't, please leave a comment down below and either myself or someone else in the community here can help you out. Also, if you have something else to add on this topic, it's more than welcome. Well, that's it for me. Until the next one, remember to smash that notification bell, like, share, subscribe, comment, consider becoming a Patreon, and you might also want to pick up, and unfortunately the motherboard tray is not removable t-shirt.